I think the main thing that we need is a market which will allow innovation, because I think the problem with a lot of the methods we use for online learning at the moment is it's very social, and that promotes consensus, and it's very difficult to have innovative and counter-consensual views. I think markets are good at producing new ideas which can be tested in a small way and can be shown to work. And I think the problem is that a lot of our education now is quite institutional, is quite resistant to change, and we don't have a market in formal education so much. I think all three have a role, but I think the one thing we really miss is education-specific software. And the only people who can create that in a sustainable way is industry. So I think industry is the partner of those three which has been forced out of the equation, and they need to be brought in. But markets only work when they're well regulated, and they serve the interests of the consumer and not the interests of the supplier. And I think because education is inevitably a public good, I think governments have a very important role in setting up the market and regulating it and making sure it's open and competitive. And I also think that one of the problems is we have a limited understanding of pedagogy, I think. A lot of the research shows that feedback's very important, but a lot of teachers are not always very good at giving feedback. A lot of rather strange ideas but become very popular, like learning styles, for example, which has very little research background. So I think good educational research at academic level is important. But I think the problem is that the academic community often is rather introspective and self-sustaining, and academics go from one project to the next without actually demonstrating that what they're saying is true. I think academics need to be more integrated with industry. So they're like academic physicists, work closely with industry, and I think educationists need to be the same. That I think what I'm saying, I'm in a very small minority. And I think that's partly because we had a debate last night and we lost heavily. But I think that's partly inevitably from what I'm saying, which is that the social network promotes consensus and the consensus is not subject to change. Well, I think we can see that there is a consensus which is very much about social networking, which is about access to information, which I don't think is what education is really about. So I think it's very difficult to change that consensus and those orthodoxies when they're established. But I should also say that of the presentations that I've seen, there have been some very good presentations on big data, which I think is very important. But I think a lot of academics and a lot of educationists, I think, are quite uncomfortable with big data. My position is I think the number of really game-changing innovations have been very few. I think that education technology has a massive potential to transform education, but I think it's so far been relatively unrealized. And I think what did work was distance learning. So 20 years ago, that was what was happening. But distance learning didn't really scale learning. It simply supported adults learning in the workplace. And it's very heavily dependent on personal tuition, which is quite expensive to provide. So I think online distance learning is a different thing. That was successful. In the UK, we had the Open University, which was very successful. Now we face a different challenge. And I really think we're right at the beginning of that journey.